Good morning. Good morning. Hope everyone's tuned in for today. It is the third Wednesday, so you know what that means. It is time for our third Wednesday parent resource chat. And see if everyone can see me. Perfect. I'm doing two jobs right now, so give me a second. So, good morning, and welcome to this month's edition of Healthy Together Mississippi's third Wednesday parent resource chat webinar. My name is Thomas Robertson, but everybody just calls me Duke. I am the Technology and Metrics Director for Oak Hill Regional Development Corporation, which is the parent corporation of Healthy Together Mississippi. Joining us, I have our usual host, but seeing today, since we're in the month of June, it is Men's Health. We decided to let Ms. Botana get the much needed break that she needed, but she is still on with us. We also recognize our program director, Sister Lottie Miner, and as well as our executive director, Dr. Michael O'Miner, who will be joining us shortly. As you are aware, our webinars are designed to ensure that we provide current and relevant information and resources that uplift and equip parents and other child care providers with practical tools, timely resources, and faith rooted encouragement. So we encourage you to share our Healthy Together Mississippi Facebook page and visit our website, www.healthytogetherms.org, and to stay tuned for all the new exciting changes. As I stated earlier, June features multiple health awareness campaigns, which includes Alzheimer Awareness, Men's Health Month, and World Sickle Cell Day. Specific health days include June 7th is Cancer Survivors Day. Celebrate life and resilience of cancer survivors. June 14th, World Blood Donor Day, raises global awareness of the need for safe blood and safe blood products. June 15th is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, a day for the world to voice its opposition to the abuse and suffering afflicted on older generations. And June 19th is World Sickle Cell Day. It raises awareness of sickle cell disease as a public health issue. So, have you ever wondered why we have so many health awareness days, weeks, and months? These observances shine a light on issues that often go unnoticed and encourage conversations about conditions that affect millions, sometimes silently, but by dedicating time to a specific topic, we create space for education, early detection, and honest dialogue. Public health organizations and medical professionals use these moments to share accurate, up to date information on prevention, symptoms, and treatment. When people understand their risks and options, they're empowered to make healthier choices. Knowledge truly is power. So today, we're focusing on black men's health. Black men face higher risk of chronic disease, mental health challenges, and shorter life expectancy, yet are less likely to receive regular checkups and annual screenings. Targeted care and strong community support can change these outcomes. Dr. Derek Griffin will help us understand the color of health, the power of early checkups, and why black men cannot afford to wait before seeing a doctor. Welcome back, Dr. Griffin. It has been a while since you have joined us. But before we start our presentation, I encourage you to please share this webinar on your social media platforms. Then make sure you have your pencil and paper ready to write down your questions, concerns, as we will be sure to save time for answering any questions you may have about the presentations, research projects dealing with the causes and consequences of drug abuse. And before Dr. Griffith comes up, I'm going to bring him on the camera on the screen now, and I'm just going to give you just a brief information about him. Make sure I'm reading this bio correctly. So, Dr. Derek M. Griffith is the Risa Lavizo Murray Population Health and Health Equity University Professor in the School of Nursing and the Perelman School of Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania. At Penn, he is also a fellow and senior advisor for the Leonard Davis Institute of Health Economics and a director of the Program for Research on Men's Health. Dr. Griffith is a public health psychologist who serves as the chair of Global Action on Men's Health and editor in chief of the International Journal of Men's Social and Community Health. He specializes in promoting the health and well being of Black American men and other men in the U.S. across the globe. Dr. Griffith is an editor of 4 books, including Men's Health Equity, a handbook, and 2 editions of Book Racism, Signs and Tools for the Public Health Professional. In 2025, he received the inaugural APHA Men's Health Caucus Jimmy Boyd Memorial Award for Leadership in Men's and Boys Health. Um, so we welcome Dr. Griffith. But before we dive into your groundbreaking work, we want to ground today's conversation in the realities Black men face here in our region. And so, for that, Dr. Griffith, I am going to turn it over to you. We are in your hands now.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the support. Thank you, Duke, for getting me here and getting us all together. Let me get my slides together. Um, okay, I think I'm hoping you can see my slides and so forth. Um, all right, very good. Um, well, it is truly a pleasure to be here with you. And again, let me say my thanks for the opportunity to share with you today. In particular, um, as soon as I get this to work, let me say my thank yous to, of course, Dr. Miner, to my second mom, Bettina Campbell, who I've worked with for probably 20 years now or so, give or take, in this community-based space and work. So it's always a pleasure. Son Terrence and family just as well. So thank you all for having me. Thank you for allowing me to share with you today. Let me start just broadly. Men's health is more than just focusing on men. Um, and this is a quote from a report that I helped to lead that was the first men's health report in the United States that we published last year with the support of the Movember Foundation. And we have this quote in here near the end of the report that men's health is never just about men. And it really does focus on the fact that, men's partners, wives, children, coworkers, and communities are all affected by men's poor health. And when men are healthy and do well, that they benefit from their health. So we need to think about men's health, not just in terms of what men's bodies do, what they don't do, men's mental health, but we need to think about men's health very broadly and the impact that it has on our larger communities and on the ways that men influence or could influence society in the work they do. One of the important parts to remember for men is that this is a quote from Tony Dungy, former football coach, but very much a man of faith, who said, "We're all important, but we're not indispensable." And I think that's an important place to start with this conversation because it's important to remember that a lot of times we will prioritize the roles and responsibilities we have in the work that we do, in the roles that we play as parents, as providers, and so forth. We'll put more importance into that than we will necessarily taking care of our own health. And men are particularly um, susceptible to doing that. And we have to remember that if you don't take care of yourself, that these are the kinds of things that if you don't take care of yourself, then you can't fulfill those roles and responsibilities. You can't do all the things that are important, and that somehow or another somebody else is going to have to step in and do those things for you, and in your place. And so it's important to recognize that you have to figure out how to take care of yourself and fulfill those roles and responsibilities. It's not a choice that we make. We have to figure out how we're going to do both. So today I'm going to provide some overview of the patterns of Black men's health in the United States. A couple of points from the report that was specific to Black men's health in Mississippi, to then look at some of the ways that we explain and can understand the priorities and some of the issues that Black men face, and then talk concretely about what are some of the things that we can do to address these issues. So promise not to go crazy with data and so forth, but I think this is a useful place to start. These are basically life expectancy, how long you could expect to live from birth at different points in our history. And so this is a graph looking at life expectancy over the last or the most recent 123 years that we have data. We don't have more recent data than the 2023 data. You see, it's quite sobering to think that in 1900, the life expectancy for Black men and women was below 35, 33 and a half for Black women, 32 for Black men, in part both because of the high rates of infant mortality and some of the other factors. But then you see this huge gap of 13, 14 years between them and their white male and white female counterparts. What you also see, though, if you continue to extend this and you look over to the right, that these gaps have closed to some degree. So they're now, 6 or 7 years versus 14, 13, 14 years, but they're still pretty large. And we see that Black men have continued to fall further and further behind, and that those differences help us to basically ask the question, well, why is it that everybody's not benefiting equally from the advances that we've had in society, the advances we've had in sanitation, in medical care, in all kinds of other technology? Why haven't they benefited Black men equally as they have everyone else? One of the other striking things, just to bring this point home a bit, is when you look at sort of comparing Black men and white men um, across across this time, you see that the gap was 14 years, 14.1 years in 1900. It closed by more than half to 5.7 years between Black men and white men in 2023. What is particularly striking, though, is the difference that grew between Black men and Black women, which was about 1 year in 1900, but over 7 years in 2023. So the point here is that while it's important to understand, Black men from thinking about us just in terms of, it's important to think about Black men from the perspective of looking at both race and gender and looking at all of the factors that are contributing to our health and not just looking at the ways that we improve the health of Black Americans just as a whole. That we have to look at sometimes the gender differences within the Black community, and often from a policy and program standpoint, we don't actually tend to break that down. We don't tend to create specific programs for Black men's health. And this is clearly making the case that we need to pay more attention to those issues. One of the other sobering statistics that we had from the report, the November report that I was mentioning, is that more than half of male deaths occur before the age of 75. 75 is significant, not just because it is the life expectancy for Americans overall, but it's also the life expectancy that we expect to see globally for people who live in advanced or industrialized countries, high income countries. And so the fact that more than half of men in general, and you see disproportionately the second highest rate of dying before the age of 75 is within Black men, that we have this particularly high rate that we have to really figure out. Black men are dying not just disproportionately, but dying particularly prematurely. And we're dying young, and we need to figure out why and what we need to do about that. When you look specifically at Mississippi, unfortunately, you have the dubious distinction of having the highest rate of dying before the age of 75 of any state in the country. And that's one of the things that we found in this report. It is higher than literally everywhere else. And so we have to think about, well, what is it unique to, or in the conversation with Dr. Miner, one of the things, and I'd love for, there to be a larger conversation at some point about what is it about Mississippi that particularly affects, this is men's health writ large, not just Black men, But I would imagine that if you were able to look at the data within Mississippi, that you would see significant gaps between Black and white men in the same way that we saw them nationally, and the rates for Black men would be far higher than what we're seeing just for the average. Um, we know that in general, why people die. I know I'm supposed to be talking about health, but we often start with why are people dying to then understand what are the things that we need to do and put in place that help people live. But so heart disease and cancer are the leading cause of death for everybody in the United States. But what you also see by looking at the graph is that the black line is for men, the green line is women, that the leading cause of death for both men and women is heart disease, and then followed by cancer. And those are also the two, and then third you see is accidents. Um, the important point here is that we tend to not recognize that these three are the largest causes of death, leading causes of death for everybody, but they also have the largest gaps between men and women. And so when we have policies and programs that are potentially statewide or national that just, again, try to improve the health of the overall population, if you don't take into account, what is it about being a man that makes you at higher risk for dying of these particular issues, then we're going to miss the opportunity to improve men's health and continue to see men, particularly Black men, fall further and further behind. The other key point I want to make as it relates to cancer is there's a lot of attention to particularly prostate cancer in Black men in particular, and that is important that we make sure that we put a lot of attention to prostate cancer. One of the things I don't want to miss, though, is the fact that lung cancer is the leading cause of cancer death, even higher than prostate cancer. And we don't tend to, and particularly for Black men, lung cancer far exceeds that of prostate cancer. And we need to pay attention to and try to figure out how we need to create programs to improve lung cancer screening, as well as get men to quit smoking and doing other things that are affecting their lung cancer risk, that we need to really pay attention to and address these things from a perspective of focusing on Black men themselves. When we break these data down by age group, we see this very interesting, again, sobering pattern that most of the heart disease and cancer deaths are far and away highest in men who are 65 and older. This is some of the breakdown, again, from the same report. And that you still see, again, that heart disease was the leading cause of death for men overall, and that accidents and suicide are particularly high for younger men. And it's really important, and homicide for that, for younger Black men. And that it's important to recognize those factors as things that we need to pay attention to for younger Black men. Again, that 15 to 34-year-old age group, that these are kinds of issues that we really need to pay attention to. And particularly, I want to talk about mental health and suicide. But before we get to that, one of the things I want to highlight is that you might think about, well, what is it I need to do to improve my heart health, to reduce my risk of cancer and those kind of things? First of all, I would say heart health is very much connected to brain health, because that's another thing you mentioned. Duke mentioned that it's also Alzheimer's Awareness Month. And so that's very much a question of cognitive functioning, your brain health, and so forth. But your heart health is very much connected to your brain health. And so the things that are good for your body are good for your brain, is the point here. And so the things that you do and that your mom and grandma have always taught you to do for taking care of yourself are always good things to do in general. Some of the just basics, I mean, a lot of this, again, it's going to boil down to what are the things you need to do to take care of yourself, or how do we need to support men in taking better care of themselves. Some of them are the most basic things that you sort of have always known that are important: to eat better, be more active, quit using tobacco of any kind, get more sleep. Sleep in and of itself is a huge risk factor for heart disease and for hypertension, which again is the leading cause of death for, again, both men and women, and particularly Black men and women. Figure out how to manage weight and keep your weight down as much as possible. Any loss in weight is going to be beneficial to any healthy loss in weight is going to be beneficial to your health. Controlling cholesterol, blood sugar, and then, of course, managing blood pressure are all things that the American Heart Association has offered as these, they call them, it was, they keep going up in number with the number of things. I don't know how they're expecting people to remember this. There was Life Simple Sevens, now it's 8. But nonetheless, these are main 8 things that we need to do to better take care of our health and well-being. One of the things I want to highlight, as I mentioned, is that, again, lung cancer is the highest, the leading cause of cancer death in men, and it's far higher than that in women, and far higher than that of prostate cancer. And so, even though we've made great progress in reducing our risk of dying from these particular types of cancer, it's important to pay attention to those and continue to do that. We also continue to need to pay attention to colorectal cancer, and that's something that has we've seen affect younger people, those under the age of 50, now starting to screen at age 40, particularly among Black Americans. So we need to pay attention to all of these things. The connection, though, without getting overwhelmed with all of these, is really going back to these 7 or 8 things. And really, I would just start with the first 3 or 4. If you eat better, more active, quit tobacco, and get better and get better sleep, and then go to the doctor to help you with the last 4, then you're gonna, do the best things to put yourself and your health in best condition to live a long and healthy life. One of the key things we rarely talk about, or certainly don't talk about enough, is mental health. And we're seeing what the former Surgeon General called a crisis of loneliness in the United States. That the rates of ill health, the rates of suicide have grown quite significantly. And as we saw for younger adult Black men, that suicide is one of the top leading causes of death for that age group, that we don't pay enough attention to mental health, and particularly depression, suicide, and those factors as they relate to men. One of the key things that this is just showing more of the specifics, that specifically for not for Black men, that the highest rate is in that 25 to 34-year-old age range. And so we see it going down after that, and it's particularly high in the 15 to 24, but it's really the highest in that 25 to 34. If you think about what's happening in their lives at that point, this is that boomerang generation of folks who are struggling. They've gotten out of college or gotten out of whatever trade school and finished, formal education, but are now struggling to be able to be independent. They may be starting families and are struggling to basically be able to really stand on their own 2 feet. And so it is starting their family, starting career, finishing whatever training and education that you're doing. And as you're sort of launching, we see people really getting hopeless, helpless, and really struggling, and men in particular, really struggling with these particular issues. One of the key points I want to make as we talk about this is that depression often looks different in men in general, and we're looking at this specifically in Black men in Philadelphia right now. So in a future time when I come back, we can talk about some of the unique findings to Black men. This was a study that we did about 10 years ago, but we're finding a lot of the patterns being similar. That while most of the time when you talk about depression, or you ask people about depression and ask men about depression, they may not be as likely to say that they're sad or depressed, and then sort of, withdrawn and so forth. But if you ask and include questions about, well, have you noticed that you're a bit more irritable? You have a bit more road rage. You may have been drinking or smoking a bit more than, you did before. Engaging in other kinds of risk-taking behavior, and doing these kind of more externalizing behaviors, that men will endorse those items or say yes to those things, where they may not have said yes to feeling sad and depressed. It's not that we're lying. it is the fact that men may have a different way of understanding and experiencing those things and experiencing what those issues are. And so we need to open up the criteria for identifying men who are in need. We're not going to have the debate now about whether these things are considered depression or not. I personally don't care at this point. The point that we're trying to make in the work that we're doing is that we're missing the opportunity to identify men who are in need by not recognizing we need to ask questions consistently about these kind of behaviors, about these kind of things that are treatable and identifiable if we're able to get men to talk about them. The other part I want to make, a point I want to make about sort of the context as we shift from the patterns to what are actually driving the patterns. Um, Men are not, when we talk about people struggling, and men struggling, we talk about the advantages that are supposed to happen just from the fact that you were born male. And that a lot of those things, in larger society, we talk about all these advantages that men are supposed to have. We know that Black men don't necessarily have all those advantages. But the point I'm trying to make here is that we need to recognize that the struggles that Black men in particular are facing are real. The struggles that boys in general and Black boys are facing in the educational system, and whether it's you're talking about primary school, elementary, middle, high school, or you're talking about college, we know that men are far less likely to males are far less likely to be successful at each of those levels and are not graduating at the same levels as young women at each of those markers and metrics of schooling. And so that does put them at a disadvantage, not just for those points, but in terms of labor market, in terms of their ability to be providers and to do those kinds of things that we were just talking about. The struggles for the labor market, particularly for Black men, and rates of unemployment are real. And so it's not in their heads, it's not in our heads that we're struggling with some of these kinds of things. And the idea of being a provider that is still very central to how many men see themselves, and particularly in the Black community, that we often see and value Black men, that has been eroded, that opportunity to do that because of some of these things, of these factors like the labor market, like the educational system, have really impeded Black men's ability to fulfill those kind of roles because they're less positioned to be successful in being able to do that. So it's not in men's imaginations that they're struggling, is my point. And we can't keep treating it as though it's a lack of effort, opportunity, and that it's just a matter of will. Because Black men lag behind Black women in all of these areas, it makes them less desirable, according to various statistics. And I'm sure you all can tell me if these play out in Mississippi. It makes them often less desirable as partners, particularly when it comes to thinking about spouses and so forth. So these are very much interconnected with these factors, and particularly as we look at these issues within the Black community, we have to pay attention to how these things are playing out, and that it is affecting our relationships and our connections within our families. That Black men are increasingly less likely to be able to fulfill these roles that made them the anchors of our families, that were really struggling for real reasons to be able to fulfill these roles and responsibilities. Not surprisingly, some of the key stressors for Black men are money and finances, family and relationships, clearly race and racism, racism in particular, really driving why race matters, jobs and career, and then, of course, health being something, and poor health being something that we need to pay more attention to as a stressor for that affects the health and well-being of men. The one of the last points as I sort of move to close that I want to make is that we tend to treat health as though it should be the primary goal that men have in their lives. And what I want to suggest to you is that health is not really our primary goal. It's really no adult's primary goal. When you become an adult, part of what an adult means is that you are now taking on roles and responsibilities, usually to take care of others and put the priorities of taking care of others more than yourself. And so health is only one of multiple things that we're aiming to do and that we're trying to do. Be successful in a marriage and in a partnership, be successful with children and have successful children. To be a have a successful job, to have enough money to do things that are important to you, and to provide for those who want to be able to do things that are important to them. To grow spiritually is another thing that you may be sort of prioritizing, or you may be prioritizing, hopefully, or prioritizing, and that we really need to pay attention to as well. But the point is, health is only one of those main things, and we keep treating it in many cases as though it should be the main thing that we're prioritizing, but it really is not. And it's realistic that it's not the main and only thing that men are prioritizing. It's only one of many things. And so, again, we have to make sure that we're realistic as we present these things to men, and as they're struggling with balancing, well, how am I supposed to prioritize being healthy while I'm trying to do these other things? And we know these are lessons that we learned from our parents and our parents' parents, that we expect men, and expect adults in general to care more about their family, to sacrifice for their family. We see it as an important value, as an important, um, badge of honor, to sacrifice for your families. Again, adults in general. Clearly, women do this all the time, that sacrifice for their family, sacrifice their health, their sleep, their well-being, their efforts to exercise and take care of themselves. And we know that this is also something that we have to deal with and recognize that men do as well. And what defines men is their ability to sort of define how they are, who they are, around their ability to fulfill these roles, and their ability to sort of think of themselves as being people of character, of value, of integrity, is something that men see, as really important and as foundational to who they are and what they're trying to achieve and what they're trying to communicate to others. We know that, just concretely, as we come up on Father's Day. um, I wrote this piece now, I guess, 7 years ago. Um, excuse me, but it still rings true today, that we were talking about this idea of role strain and some of the work we had done to date. That and This story got a lot of press and attention at the time, that fathers were taking better care of their children, or investing more and sacrificing more to take care of their children, more so than they were sacrificing to take care of their own health and well-being. Again, we are talking about it here in the context of fathers. Clearly, this is something mothers do, quite all the time. When we, again, have that expectation of adults, of parents, we don't often look at this, though, as a stressor that fathers often face, and how that affects their health and well-being, that they're trying to, again, walk and chew gum, do these two things at the same time, but realizing that the struggles that we face in going to the doctor, taking care of our health outside of the doctor's office, and so forth, are things that they're putting on the back burner so that they can do other things for other people. And I think we need to put these things in that context to better help us understand how we need to address these issues. And so, let me skip. What that means concretely is that it's not, a lot of men will see taking care of themselves, or prioritizing making time to go to the doctor, making time to exercise, making time to get more sleep, as being selfish, or as not taking care of, or as putting their responsibilities, their roles as fathers, their roles as husbands, as second to, um, as not prioritizing those things in the way that they should. What we need to do is help men reframe that, and reinforce and support men in reframing those issues, that taking care of yourself doesn't mean you're trying to put yourself first. It means you're also trying to take care of yourself, and that we're trying to strike a better balance between those two. We know that, for if we look at successful people, they find a way to do this. Now, obviously, their lives are able to condition are positioned better to do this when you have, even people, when you have the opportunity and the resources to do it, it's far easier to do this. So it is definitely one of those things that I recognize is difficult. It's nonetheless important and critical if we're going to have healthy men that they have to figure out, we have to figure out, even in less than ideal circumstances, how we're going to balance these two, how we're going to find time to take care of ourselves, to take care of what things that are important to us, but also make sure that we're taking care of our mental health, that we're taking care of going to the doctor, and doing things that are important outside of going to the doctor that help us to make sure that we're the best us that we can be. So some of the things that men can do to take care of themselves is find that trusted source of care and find a what you could call primary care home, a main doctor, and so forth. Obviously, even with the Affordable Care Act, that has been difficult for some men to do, but we still do need to continue to push forward to try to figure out how men can get access to regular care. A lot of the screenings, checkups, and so forth, it's not enough to just do once. It's something that you have to do, if not every year, every other year, because part of what you're looking at with things like whether it's diabetes, whether it's hypertension, or even prostate cancer, you're usually looking at a trend over time. It's bad to have a bad exam and to have scores that are bad on certain tests that you get when you go to the doctor. But it's important to be able to be diagnosed. Often it means looking at those over time, over several months or over years, and you see the changes over time. That's what tells you that this is something that is not just a moment in time that you're struggling with, that it's actually something that needs to be diagnosed as diabetes versus you just had, high blood sugar on that particular day. Needs to be diagnosed as high and treated as hypertension. It wasn't just that you had a lot of salt right before you got to the doctor's office. So there are a lot of things that we have to check, over time. Part of the thing Duke mentioned in the intro was, why do we need to go to the doctor? Part of the reason you need to go to the doctor is because you can't tell. We often treat health as though it's something, if I look okay and I feel okay, then I'm okay. That's not true. You have no idea how okay you are just because of how you look and how you feel. Those are two very important things that men often use to judge their health. But there are lots of things that are going on in your body that you can't tell until you actually get to the doctor and do those tests that allow you to see, well, what is your blood sugar? What is your, blood pressure? How do we need to look at your cholesterol, as was mentioned in the American Heart Association 8 guidelines. What are those things that you can't see and can't feel just by how you sort of are feeling when you wake up? And so we need to pay attention to those. And even some aspects of mental health may become so normal for you that you don't realize that they're actually treatable. When you start to struggle with life, just life being lifing, and you're really figuring out that you're really going through a rough patch, you don't realize that talking to someone or some other kinds of medical intervention could be helpful, whether it's medication or not. But at least normalizing and talking to other men could be something that's really important to help you better understand how you could intervene to address those issues. Some of the other quick things that men can do is often, particularly as men get into middle age and get to be a bit older, we tend to neglect, because we're prioritizing work, our relationships, our friends with other men, and not spend enough time to just have guy time to really just be able to decompress and connect with one another. And that actually helps to normalize some of the things that we experience. One of the things that we often um, misrepresent in the way that we think about these things is men will often think that they're the only ones who are struggling with work. They're only ones who are struggling with their ability to have a good relationship with their spouse. That they're only ones struggling with their kids going crazy. They feel like they're isolated and alone in those challenges. But when you actually get to talk to other men and realize, oh, we're all struggling with this. We all don't have a good time. We're all struggling with different things. It normalizes it in a way that you don't feel like you're alone in those challenges. and it gives you ideas, opportunities to get ideas and just get support around those kinds of things. So it's important to then also know when you need to take the last step of getting additional help, when you might be in crisis, where to go for those things, but also to just make sure that you have these kind of skills and opportunities to utilize the resources that may be available in your communities. So again, um, we're all important, but we're not indispensable. And we really need to make sure that as men that we take care of our health, take care of our bodies while we do the other things that we know are really important for our families and our communities. But you've got to figure out how to strike this balance in a very difficult balance, albeit um, difficult, but nonetheless important, that you take care of your health as well as take care of these other responsibilities that are important to you. Thanks.
All right, Dr. Griffith, thank you so much, man. What a fact-filled presentation. And look, I want to give a shout out to Duke for getting us started today on this call. Um, but I think some of the people that that got questions from joined it late. So
Okay.
I just we're gonna hear. We just want to make sure to provide. And look, we appreciate all the great questions we received across social media and everything else. And I'd be remiss. I know I'm a father, but still, Happy Father's Day. Oh, excuse me, as I always say, Happy Father's Minute, since the women have the whole Mother's Day month. So Happy Father's Day Minute for all our fathers. All right. Well, look, I think we probably got some questions about this racism piece. Um, a couple of questions. I think it best be summarized. They said how. I'm gonna summarize several questions together. So how do social and structural inequities like racism, income, and geography shape men's life expectancy in the U.S.? And some of them also saying how does that affect their health as well? So if you kind of can make a quick response to that, we'd be appreciative.
Yeah, that's a hard one to answer quickly, but the short answer I'll say is that you have to, if you're going to think about racism as it relates to Black men, then I would say you want to be more precise and say anti-Black gendered racism looks different than other forms of racism. How racism looks for Native American populations, for Latino populations, looks very different. And it looks very different. The assumptions that you make about Black men and the fears that people have of Black men and Black men being successful are just fundamentally different than even what Black women experience. And so the point is there, if you think about racism as not just sort of individual interactions, but as a process of creating opportunities for people to both be healthy as well as to have the resources that promote their health, you can then look at a lot of things that may seem unrelated as
Mm,
being quite related to Black men's health. So the fact that we've seen, so one of the things that it would be helpful to do, or I should have done, is show different sort of historical markers or points on that life on that graph I showed of 123 years of Black men being at the bottom and then falling further and further behind while everybody is getting better. That there are things that happen that while we didn't think of them as, or didn't, they weren't framed as targeting Black men, they differentially, clearly affected Black men. The marketing of tobacco products. I mean,
mm,
we all saw the cool, basically grew up with Cool Jazz Festival, all the marketing of all the different, drug, alcohol marketing and all those kinds of things that were very much targeted not just to Black people, but specifically to Black men, since most of the people that were smoking and drinking those things were Black men. They weren't just Black Americans, they were Black men. You have a lot of things like the incarceration rate and basically those kind of things that very much differentially affected Black men. Educational patterns, like you can see all of these different things that create these stressors, create these that impede the opportunities for men to be successful and healthy, and therefore opportunities to live a long and healthy life.
right. And I remember growing up, Ebony Magazine and Jet was
There
all
you
filled with
go.
all the cigarette advertisement, everything else. Well, look, for us at Oak Hill Regional CDC, we have our initiative called DADS that we're trying to do outreach specifically for, as we say, um, households without a dad physically present. What do you think are some things that organizations like Oak Hill and churches can do to help us along this line? And I think it's specifically coming to Father's Day, some particular things that we can look at that will help, to improve those men's health outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, I think just providing support and
Hmm.
recognizing and honoring dads for being more than just providers,
Mm,
honoring dads for being more than just, for the struggles that they're having, and just recognizing that it's real. Like they're not, when they're struggling to do stuff and we fall down and we fail and we don't live up to standards and so forth. It's not lack of effort very much. Often it is actually it's just failure. And it's just we struggled and we failed. We just couldn't do whatever it was with the challenges that we faced and with the tools that we had. So recognizing those kind of things, and valuing men for just trying, for just doing those kind of things that they can do, and trying to create those spaces to help them again get the supports that they need for things that actually um, that are important to promoting their health and well-being. So getting men to go to the doctor is more than just, the thing that, well, a lot of men actually say that they want to go to the doctor, they just don't have the time, the resources, and so forth. So it's not like Black men don't want to go. It's often that, there are these opportunities that just don't present themselves for men to go. So we do need to recognize that. And often what we found in our work when we ask Black men, why don't you go? Is because when they go, they don't have a good experience. They don't feel like they got anything useful. They feel like they wasted their time, and
mm,
often were disrespected when they went to the doctor because just the nature of the treatment, the relationship didn't develop, and they were, subtle and other things that were said or just the way they were treated were not really beneficial. Even more concretely, they would often talk about, I didn't get any new information that I had before I got there. Like I knew I needed to lose weight before I got there. You telling me I need to lose weight and you not giving me any tools to do it is not helpful. Dismissing me talk about being stressed and overworked and whatever and not talking about my mental health and are there things that we can do to better support it is not helpful. So part of it, we do also have to do the work with the medical community to help equip them to go back to your question, sorry, I moved away from that.
that's no problem. It's good
Providing
information.
social support to men and helping create the spaces for men to get together to
Mm,
support each other in healthy ways can also be something that is really important for
mm,
men. One of the things that we did, Mrs. Campbell was part of our advisory board
mhm,
for one of my
mhm,
earliest studies on called Mighty Men, where
mm,
we did a weight loss intervention for middle-aged and older Black men. But the secret sauce to it was basically just that we got men together and they had the opportunity, and we created the spaces and the opportunities for them to do exercise, but also learn and created spaces for them to talk about things that they hadn't really had the opportunity to or made the space to talk about. And so that they were able to create the structures in their lives to say, okay, at least these couple days, I'm going to take 30 minutes or I'm going to take an hour and I'm going to, get together and we're going to exercise or we're going to basically, just at least talk about these information. But it's basically providing those kind of tools and opportunities and spaces for men to feel that they're seen and heard. I think is a really key part of what churches, community organizations can do.
all right, I'm gonna do this. We're gonna and look, everybody. We're definitely gonna be done by 12, but we got a lot of questions. I think this
Right.
question can summarize. They want to know why is it that there's so much research on women and women's health, and not very little on men. So,
Ooh, don't get me started on that one.
well, I'm just hey, look, hey,
No,
the audience.
we here. So hey, no, no, I'm only kidding. So it's interesting question. The part of the answer though is I think because I get pushback on as one who's made his career focused largely on Black men's health, I get a lot of pushback about, well, why every time it is, why don't you focus on women, and why aren't you focusing on trans men? A whole nother conversation, but this is the pushback explicitly that I get. One of the things that their justification for not focusing on men is, well, the whole system is designed around men, and we've always studied men. That basically drug dosing is based on male bodies. Most until fairly recently, the last 20, 30 years, women, particularly pregnant women, couldn't be involved in medical research. And so we had to actually put things in place for women to be involved in medical research and so forth. So that male bodies were the standard by which we created most of the guidelines for medicine, for biomedical research. And so what my friendly response to them is, we know a lot about male bodies. We don't know a lot about men's health. Men's health is broader than male bodies.
Mm.
Men's health is about our social experience, how we identify as men, and how we uniquely, in this case, identify as Black men, which is a whole different thing than just saying, okay, let me look at the effect of what it means to be Black and what it means to be a man, and then push those together. That's not what a Black man is. I mean, very much as being a Black woman is something totally unique and beautiful. But it's very unique to the way that we think about the wholeness of who you are. Being a Black man is very different than just thinking about us as that collection and that addition of things. And we haven't looked at those factors in the context of all the other stuff I was talking about in terms of these different educational systems, all these other barriers to men just living healthy, strong lives, being well, and just in general. So I think it's just that there's pushback and fear that attending to men's health is going to take resources and attention away from women's health. Part of the reason I do more general men's health work is because I know I don't trust, to be blunt, that there's ever going to be a set of national policies that are going to focus on promoting Black men's health by itself. That if we're going to get anything done on Black men's health, that it's going to have to be under the larger umbrella of men's health, and it will just have to differentially benefit Black men. And so that if we're thinking about these things from a programmatic standpoint, we just need to make sure we pay attention to Black men. But that's the bigger picture of why I think it's just,
Okay.
yeah, there are multiple reasons, but those are some of the basic ones.
All right, I'm gonna get one more question, but also people asking what's behind me. Yes, this is the logo for our Dad's Initiative. Duca
Ah,
has already put this in the chat for the Zoom, and also we'll do this on our social media. I tell you, folks are really being attentive today. Look, just one more
all right.
question that kind of can summarize this. Look, just practically, what's one thing that we all could do, just anybody, just in general, we could do tomorrow to help advance men's health? What would that be? The
Get
practical
better
thing for us.
sleep.
You what now?
Get better sleep.
All right, y'all heard that.
And the
Let them
reason I
know what they
say
would do.
that, yeah, concretely, the reason I say that is twofold. Again,
Hmm.
heart disease is the leading cause of death for men and women, and
Okay.
particularly for Black men and women, it's much higher than most other racial and ethnic groups aside from Native Americans.
Hmm.
One of the bigger things that happens with sleep is your body is able to basically restore itself. And if you don't get enough sleep, and if you don't bring the stress level down in your body to be able to then, for it to do the magic that God created it to do, then there's not going to be the opportunity for it to be able to create the things that you need it to do. And so if it's part of the why your body wears and tears over time, and why we have the rates of premature mortality, the rates of the shorter life expectancy and so forth, is because you don't have the opportunity to restore, your body doesn't have the opportunity to restore itself. And it's one of the big things, even within the National Institutes of Health and the National Institute on Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute actually added sleep as one of the major things that they are now focusing on as a risk factor for heart disease. And because it does have such an impact on your ability to sort of bring down your blood pressure, your hypertension levels, and your hypertension rates, and so forth. So I would say eat healthier and sleep would be the two big things, but I would even prioritize sleep over eating at this point, just because there's so much attention to to eating already, but I would say one of the things that we may not think enough about is how well and how much you sleep.
All right. Well, look, everybody that was had more questions, all we can count on count in today. Those that are watching virtually, watching on Zoom, will Dr. Griffin be around for a while long. But Dr. Griffin, well, thank you. And I work with him on a couple other things that I want you all to know he's very passionate about the work he's doing. All right. Look, we thank you again as we get ready to close, Dr. Griffin, for being a part of this very special Men's Health Third Wednesday Resource Chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. We're going to get ready to wrap up today. We want to remind everyone that we have our Ask Mary and Pat Zoom webinar that's coming up on June 29th. That'll be the one before our summer break. We'll be off for the month of July and come back at the end of August. Let's Talk Real Estate with Area Mays, which, wow, we really appreciate the response we received from that. That'll be on Thursday, June 25th, 11 a.m. We want to remember that our next Thursday resource chat won't be in July. We're going to take July off, but we'll see you back in August 19th, and we'll talk about the August Health and Services National Adolescent Immunization Month. Yes, immunizations do work, and please be sure to join us for this and tell your family and friends about it. Listen to, don't want to miss it. Every time we have one of these, it's great information is being shared. You may also learn more about what we're doing on our Healthy Together Mississippi webpage. That's healthytogetherms.org. Look, like our Facebook page. We got great things there. We know that Facebook Live disappears rapidly quickly, but you can go to our YouTube page. We really appreciate all the feedback we've been getting from people who've been using our videos to in the small group discussions and things in the church and the community and sharing with their families and everybody else. That just makes us feel great about the work that we're doing. All right. Any other questions you have, let us know. We also have our new dad's initiative called Fathering Forward Fellowships. If you'd like more information about that, you can email us as well. Pastor Bernard Montgomery is leading that. A lot of great things happening at Oak Hill Regional CDC and Healthy Together Mississippi. Well, look, it's got to wrap this up. Once again, we want to acknowledge our leadership team. I am very honored to be the executive director of Oak Hill Regional CDC and Healthy Together Mississippi. Our very capable program director, Lyda Minor. I just don't say that because she's my wife. She does a very able job. Well, we thank our board and all our team, our awesome team. And of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't give a big shout out to our tech host, moderator, and the one that was pinch hitting when I was picking up meals for the summer feeding program, Brother Thomas Duke Robinson. All right, this has been a production of Oak Hill Regional Community Development Corporation, empowering parents and strengthening families in the Mid-South region and across the state of Mississippi. God bless you and God keep you.